also the Education Committee Chair for the Texas League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, for about 3 years in the state of Texas. And as the committee chair, we were able to work across the state with our local LULAC chapters and then in coalitions to address the testing system, vouchers, higher education, school finance, and bilingual education matters. And upon doing that work and realizing just how difficult it is to lead a state and to work with a community that is resource challenged, it was time to have a center. And so now I'm the director of the Texas Center for Education Policy, where a lot of that work is continuing. Stay tuned for soon-to-be Dr. Patricia Lopez, who is doing a very powerful dissertation right now that's actually looking at what happens when you're on the ground listening to the conversations, public testimony at the Texas State Legislature when people are talking about how to develop policy. And this is a really important thing to think about because as researchers, unfortunately, we tend to come in at the end of that process and we are trying to determine whether a policy is good or bad or implemented well, or maybe we just need capacity in order to implement it well. It's not promoting sufficient equity, it's not reducing the gap, only to realize that the rationalizations that went into that were never about providing greater equity or opportunities for children in our state, and particularly the most resource poor. I mean, think about that. And so a whole lot of research is focused on implementation. And I think that one of the takeaways from today is that if that's what you're focusing on, you're also probably getting suckered into certain myths about what went into the development of this policy that we might refer to as chorizo, right? As sausage. It's sausage making, right? And so I mean, there's research involved, of course. But there's a lot of other things that are involved as well, powerful interests, not the least of which is the corporate agenda. If you want to read a really, really excellent piece on this, I encourage you to read a piece called Education, Inc. in the Texas Observer by Abby Rappaport. In 2009, I was saying that we were basically in the throes of this developing STAR system of accountability. What also happened, however, was that Representative Olivo's bills were filed, and we were able to successfully eliminate high-stakes testing for third graders in the state of Texas, positively affecting 300,000 children this year. There are victories, and it suggests that there is a role still for those of us who are championing these kinds of causes, because clearly there's children that right now are not going to be retained in grade because of this. There's the larger story here is that even as we're working toward a progressive policy agenda, one that is socially just and equitable and research-based and valid and fair, there's still all of these other conversations that we're not privy to that involve powerful folks. And so it's a process, right? It takes time. And if there's any lesson that comes out of this, it's that there's no substitute for prolonged engagement. There is no substitute. And if we think about ethnography and qualitative research, prolonged engagement facilitates what really is the gold standard of understanding context in social science, ethnography, right? It's prolonged engagement. If we think about policy, we should also think and understand, grasp that policies, they have long lives. They outlive us, okay? Many are historic. They involve legal challenges and battles. And so if you really want to address an issue, you could actually create more harm than assistance if you're just going to be a person that parachutes in to a committee and to testify before a committee or a legislative hearing, or to provide sporadic, episodic advice, because you really can't advise well unless you have a deep understanding of context. And so this is something that has really come into focus in our work at the Texas Center for Education Policy. Yet very few policy centers will ever treat policy in this way. Most policy centers treat it as, mostly as isolated chunks, and researchers that want to be policy oriented treat their research as having policy implications and policy relevance, okay? And so that's also a really limited approach to policy. There's something that's not happening that needs to happen. And so I think that the theory of action that we call engaged policy at the Texas Center for Education Policy, being engaged in the process, is addressing that gap that exists. And it's a terrible gap that exists between our institutions of higher education and our policymaking places. We're not there. And that gap, guess what? It gets filled by mercenary researchers. It gets filled by think tanks and organizations that don't always have the public's interest in mind.